The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of Tombstone Junction, a forgotten speck of civilization clinging to the edge of the desert. Jesse Hartman squinted against the glare, his weathered hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt .45. The wanted poster in his vest pocket crinkled softly as he moved. Evelyn Rose. Wanted for murder and identity theft. $500 reward, dead or alive. He'd been tracking her for 3 weeks now, following whispers and rumors through mining camps and cattle towns. The trail had gone cold twice, but Jesse was nothing if not persistent. In his line of work, persistence meant survival, and survival meant payday. The Broken Wheel Saloon stood before him, its batwing doors hanging crooked on rusty hinges. According to the telegraph operator in Tucson, a widow named Mary had started working here 2 months ago, same time Evelyn Rose had vanished from Santa Fe. Jesse had learned long ago that coincidences were about as common as water in the desert. He pushed through the doors, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The air hung thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of cheap whiskey. A few miners hunched over their drinks at the bar, while a poker game occupied a corner table. Behind the bar, a woman in a faded blue dress poured drinks with practiced efficiency. Jesse's breath caught, even in the poor light, even with her golden hair pinned up severely and her fine features obscured by exhaustion. She was beautiful. Too beautiful for a place like this. Too refined, despite her obvious attempts to appear otherwise. She looked up as he approached, and for a fraction of a second, fear flashed in her green eyes before she smoothed her expression into professional indifference. "Whiskey?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight tremor she couldn't quite hide. "That'll do." Jesse settled onto a bar stool, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. No need to spook her yet. She poured with a steady hand, but he noticed how she kept her distance, how her other hand stayed near the bar rag, probably concealing a derringer or a knife. Smart woman. "Haven't seen you around before," she said, attempting casual conversation. "Just passing through." Jesse sipped the whiskey, grimacing at its harsh bite. "Looking for work. Maybe heard there might be some trouble with claim jumpers up north. Always trouble somewhere." She moved down the bar to serve another customer, but Jesse felt her watching him from the corner of her eye. He nursed his drink for an hour, observing. She was good, kept up the widow act well, knew all the regulars by name, moved like someone who'd been pouring drinks all her life. But there were tells, the way she held herself, spine straight as a finishing school graduate. The way she counted change, quick and precise like someone used to handling larger sums. The slight flinch when one of the miners got too friendly. As the afternoon wore on, the saloon emptied. Jesse waited. Patience was another survival skill in his profession. Finally, she approached him again. "Another?" "No, ma'am." He set his glass down carefully. "I think we both know why I'm here, Miss Rose." The bottle slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In the same instant, she lunged for something under the bar, but Jesse was already moving. He vaulted over the bar, catching her wrist as her fingers closed around a small pistol. "Don't," he said quietly. She fought him then, fought with a desperation that surprised him. Her free hand clawed at his face, drawing blood from his cheek. A knee aimed for his groin forced him to twist aside. She was stronger than she looked, and clearly not some pampered society lady playing at being dangerous. But Jesse had 30 pounds and years of experience on her. He wrestled the gun away, spinning her around to pin her arms behind her back. She continued to struggle, cursing him with language that would have made a sailor blush. "Evelyn Rose," he said, pulling out his iron shackles. "You're under arrest for murder and—" "I'm not Evelyn Rose." She writhed against his grip. "You're making a mistake." "Sure, and I'm President Grant." He clicked the shackles onto her wrists, trying to ignore how small and delicate they felt. "Save your breath for the judge. Please." Her voice broke, all fight suddenly draining from her. "Please, you don't understand. If you take me back, they'll kill me, the real murderer." "Lady, I've heard every sob story there is." Jesse turned her to face him, hardening himself against the tears streaming down her cheeks. Innocent folks don't run. They don't hide under false names in border towns. I didn't have a choice." The raw desperation in her voice almost made him hesitate. Almost. But Jesse had learned long ago that everybody had a story. Everybody was innocent. Everybody had a reason. His job wasn't to sort truth from lies. That was for judges and juries. His job was to bring them in. He marched her out of the saloon. Ignoring the stares of the few remaining patrons, his horse waited at the hitching post, a reliable bay gelding named Dust. Her horse, he assumed, was the painted mare tied next to it. Too fine an animal for a saloon girl, another tell he'd filed away. "Where are we going?" she asked as he helped her mount, her bound hands making it awkward. "Cedar Falls. 3-day ride if we push hard." 3 days. She laughed bitterly. "They'll find us before then. You've just signed both our death warrants." Jesse swung up behind her, reaching around to take the reins. The necessity of their position, her back pressed against his chest, his arms encircling her, sent an unwelcome jolt through him. He'd transported female prisoners before. It had never affected him like this. "Who's they?" he asked as they rode out of town. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so softly, he almost missed it. The men who killed the real Evelyn Rose. The men who needed someone to blame. They rode in silence as Tombstone Junction disappeared behind them and the desert stretched endlessly ahead. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Jesse found himself oddly aware of every shift of her body against his, every subtle change in her breathing. As darkness fell, he guided them off the main trail to a spot he'd camped at before, a ring of rocks that provided some shelter and concealment. An old, abandoned line shack stood nearby, its roof half collapsed, but one corner still intact enough to provide shelter. He helped her dismount, steadying her when her legs buckled slightly. "When's the last time you ate?" She shrugged, not meeting his eyes. Jesse tethered the horses and gathered what dry brush he could find for a fire. He had hardtack and jerky in his saddlebags, plus a can of beans. Not much, but it would do. As he worked, she sat on a flat rock, watching him with those green eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect? Someone crueler? Most bounty hunters are." Jesse didn't respond. He'd met plenty of cruel men in his line of work, some days. He wondered if he was becoming one of them. The fire caught, casting dancing shadows across her face. He heated the beans and offered her a portion, along with some hardtack. She ate mechanically, struggling slightly with her bound hands. "I need to." She gestured vaguely toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Jesse sighed. This was always awkward. "I'll walk you out a ways. Don't try anything stupid." She didn't. When they returned, he secured her ankle to a heavy iron stake he drove into the ground. Long enough chain to let her lie down comfortably, but not enough to reach the horses or his gear. "The ground's cold," he said gruffly, tossing her his spare blanket. "Try to sleep. We ride at first light." She wrapped the blanket around herself, curling up on her side. Jesse settled across the fire from her, rifle across his lap. He'd learned to doze lightly, waking at any unusual sound, but sleep wouldn't come. In the flickering firelight, he could see tears sliding silently down her cheeks. No sobs, no hysteria, just quiet, hopeless tears that somehow affected him more than any dramatic display could have. "What's your real name?" he found himself asking. She turned her face away. "Does it matter? Evelyn Rose is who I am now, who I'll die as. Nobody's dying on my watch." "You really believe that?" She looked at him then, and the hollow despair in her eyes made something twist in his chest. "You think your gun and your reputation will stop them? You don't know who you're dealing with. Then tell me." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And give you more reason to collect your bounty. I may be desperate, Mr. Hartman, but I'm not a fool." He should have let it drop. Should have treated her like any other prisoner, fed, watered, and delivered. But something about her got under his skin. Maybe it was the way she'd fought, fierce but not vicious. Maybe it was the intelligence in her eyes, or the way she held herself even in defeat. Get some sleep, he said finally. Whatever's chasing you, it can wait until morning. She pulled the blanket tighter and closed her eyes, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. Neither was he. They lay there in the darkness, two strangers bound by iron and circumstance. While the desert wind whispered secrets neither was ready to hear. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, lonely, defiant, and wild. Jesse found himself thinking it sounded exactly how he felt. Dawn came slowly to the desert, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Jesse woke to find Evelyn already alert, sitting up with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the sunrise with an expression of such profound sadness it made his chest tighten. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said without looking at him. "I used to watch the sunrise from my bedroom window back—" She caught herself, shaking her head. "Doesn't matter now." Jesse rose stiffly, joints protesting the night spent on hard ground. He'd give anything for a cup of coffee. But they needed to move. The morning cool wouldn't last, and crossing the desert in full heat was dangerous even for seasoned travelers. He unlocked her ankle chain and helped her stand. As she turned to fold the blanket, her movements pulled her dress tight across her back, and Jesse glimpsed something that made him freeze, the unmistakable outline of raised scars beneath the fabric. Whip marks, if he had to guess. Old ones, long-heeled, but extensive. She caught him looking and quickly adjusted her shawl, her face flushing. Neither spoke of it. They made a cold breakfast of jerky and the last of the hardtack, washing it down with warm water from their canteens. Jesse watched her eat, noting how she broke the hardtack into small pieces first, soaking them in water, the way someone would who'd had to make food stretch. Who'd known hunger? "There's a man," she said suddenly, not meeting his eyes. "Theodore Blackwood. Railroad money, political connections all the way to Washington. He wanted things from me. When I refused, when I threatened to expose what he was really doing with those government contracts." She trailed off, twisting her bound hands. The real Evelyn Rose was his mistress. She knew too much, just like I did. When she died, when he killed her, he needed someone to blame. Someone who was already causing him problems. Jesse kept his expression neutral, though the name Blackwood rang bells. He'd heard whispers about the man. None of them good. That's quite a story. "It's the truth." She looked at him then, green eyes blazing with conviction. "I know you don't believe me. Why would you? But I swear on my mother's grave, I never killed anyone. I'm guilty of many things. Mr. Hartman, but not murder." He didn't respond, just helped her mount her horse and swung up behind her. The truth was, he was starting to have doubts. Everything about her story was wrong. Real killers had a look about them, a hardness that went bone deep. This woman had steel in her spine. Sure enough, but it was the kind forged by survival, not violence. They rode in silence for the first hour, the horses picking their way carefully across the rocky terrain. The sun climbed higher, its heat already oppressive. Jesse found himself distracted by irrelevant details, the way wisps of golden hair escaped from her pins to curl against her neck, the faint scent of lavender that somehow clung to her despite everything. "You're from back east," he said, needing conversation to drive away his inappropriate thoughts. "Your accent gives you away." She laughed softly. "And here I thought I'd learn to talk like a proper Western woman. Yes, Mr. Hartman, I'm from back east, a lifetime ago. What brought you out here? The same thing that brings everyone west, the promise of a new life, a chance to be someone different." Her voice turned bitter. "I should have known you can't outrun your past." They stopped at midday near a cluster of rocks that provided scant shade. Jesse rationed their water carefully. 2 more days to Cedar Falls, and already their supplies were running lower than he'd like. He watched Evelyn drink, noting how she made each sip last, another sign of someone who'd learned hard lessons about scarcity. "You know how to shoot?" he asked suddenly. She looked surprised. "Why do you ask?" "The way you went for that pistol yesterday. You knew exactly where it was. Had your hand positioned right. That's training, not instinct." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. My father taught me. He said a lady should know how to defend herself, especially out here where civilization is more suggestion than fact. Smart man. He was? The smile faded. He died 3 years ago. Smallpox outbreak in Kansas City. They remounted and continued on. The landscape began to change. Red rock giving way to scrub brush and Joshua trees. Jesse knew this stretch well. They'd reach Maverick's Well by sunset if they kept pace. The old trading post there had been abandoned for years, but the well still produced good water. It was late afternoon when Jesse spotted the dust cloud. His body tensed immediately, hand moving to his rifle. Out here, dust meant riders, and riders usually meant trouble. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, feeling his sudden alertness. "Company coming. 3, maybe 4 riders. Moving fast." He quickly evaluated their options. The terrain here was too open to hide, and their horses were tired. Running wasn't an option. "It's them," she whispered, face draining of color. "Blackwood's men. I told you they'd find us." Jesse guided their horses behind a large boulder, dismounting quickly. "Can you ride hard if needed?" She nodded, fear replacing the resignation in her eyes. The riders came into view, 4 men, armed and riding with purpose. Jesse recognized the type immediately. Hired guns, the kind who asked no questions as long as the pay was good. They hadn't spotted them yet, but it was only a matter of time. "Listen carefully," he said quietly, unlocking her shackles. "If this goes bad, you take your horse and ride north. Don't stop until you reach Josiah's trading post. Tell old Josiah that Jesse sent you. He'll help. What about you? My job is to bring you in alive. Can't do that if you're dead." He checked his weapons, rifle, pistol, backup Derringer. "Stay behind the rocks. Don't come out no matter what you hear." The riders were closing in, spread out in a search pattern. Jesse stepped out from cover, rifle casual in his hands, but ready. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he called out. "Hot day for hard riding." The lead rider, a scarred man with cold eyes, reined in his horse. Well, Jesse Hartman. Heard you were transporting precious cargo. Just heading to Cedar Falls on business. Nothing that concerns you boys." "See, that's where you're wrong." The scarred man smiled, showing gold teeth. "Our employer is very interested in your cargo. Willing to pay triple your bounty if you hand her over nice and quiet. Not interested? Figured you'd say that." The man's hand drifted toward his gun. "Shame, really. You got a good reputation. Hartman, hate to see it end here in the middle of nowhere." Jesse saw the telltale tensing of shoulders, the slight shift in saddle position. When the scarred man went for his gun, Jesse was already moving. His first shot took the leader in the chest, sending him toppling backward. The second caught another rider in the shoulder, spinning him around. Return fire exploded around him, bullets whining off rocks. Jesse dove for better cover, working the lever of his rifle with practiced speed. A third rider tried to flank him, but Jesse anticipated the move. Putting 2 bullets center mass, the 4th man, younger than the others, lost his nerve. He wheeled his horse around and spurred it hard, fleeing back the way they'd come. Jesse let him go. 3 bodies lay still in the dust. The shoulder-shot rider groaned weakly, but posed no immediate threat. Jesse kicked his weapons away and checked the others. All dead. He was walking back to the boulder when he heard Evelyn cry out. He spun to find her struggling with the wounded rider, who'd managed to crawl close enough to grab her ankle. Without thinking, Jesse drew and fired, the bullet catching the man in the head. Evelyn scrambled backward, eyes wide with shock. He was trying to... "I know." Jesse helped her to her feet, noting how badly her hands shook. "You hurt?" She shook her head, then suddenly turned and was violently sick behind the rocks. Jesse waited patiently, understanding. The first time seeing death up close hit everyone hard. When she straightened, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand, he offered her water from his canteen. "You saved my life," she said quietly. "You could have taken their money. Triple the bounty. That's a lot for a man in your profession." "I don't work for men like Blackwood." The name tasted sour in his mouth. And I gave my word to bring you in alive. I keep my word." She studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "Even if I'm innocent?" "That's for a judge to decide." But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. The attack confirmed at least part of her story. Men like Blackwood didn't send hired guns after common murderers. They let the law handle that. They sent killers when they needed someone silenced. Jesse quickly stripped the bodies of ammunition and supplies, trying not to think too hard about what he'd just done. He'd killed before in his line of work, but always in clear self-defense. This felt different. This felt like choosing a side. They rode hard for Maverick's Well, pushing the tired horses. The abandoned trading post came into view just as the sun touched the horizon, its adobe walls crumbling but still standing. The well was intact, the water clear and cold. Jesse set up camp inside the ruins, using the walls for protection. He didn't reshackle Evelyn. She'd had plenty of opportunity to run during the fight and hadn't taken it. As darkness fell, they sat by a small fire, sharing a meal from the supplies he'd taken from the dead men. Good supplies, coffee, biscuits, even some dried fruit. Blackwood obviously paid well. "Tell me about him," Jesse said finally. "Blackwood, tell me everything." So she did, in a quiet, steady voice. She told him about arriving in Denver 2 years ago, finding work as a bookkeeper for one of Blackwood's companies, how she discovered discrepancies, government contracts for railroad supplies that never arrived, money diverted to private accounts, bribes to Indian agents to look the other way while reservation land was illegally seized. "I was naive," she said, staring into the fire. "I thought if I gathered enough evidence, I could go to the authorities. I didn't understand that Blackwood owned the authorities." What happened then? Her hand unconsciously moved to her back, where Jesse had seen the scars. "He found out what I was doing, had me brought to his estate outside Denver, said I had 2 choices, become his mistress and keep quiet, or disappear. When I refused," she shuddered. "He had me whipped, said it was a lesson in obedience, said worse would come if I didn't learn my place." Jesse's hands clenched into fists. He'd known men like Blackwood all his life, men who thought money and power gave them the right to own people. "How did you escape?" "Evelyn, the real Evelyn Rose, helped me. She was already his mistress, but she hated him. She'd been planning to run, had documents that could destroy him. We were going to leave together, testify against him, but he found out, killed her, and framed me for it. I've been running ever since." The fire crackled between them. Jesse found himself believing her, despite all his instincts telling him not to get involved. In his experience, everyone lied. But the pain in her voice, the details of her story, it had the ring of truth. "What's your real name?" he asked quietly. She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Charlotte Whitmore. Though I haven't been her for so long, sometimes I forget she ever existed." Charlotte. It suited her better than Evelyn, he thought. There was something pure about it, innocent, everything this woman had been before the world broke her. "Get some rest, Charlotte," he said, testing the name. "We still have 2 days of hard riding ahead." She looked at him sharply, catching his use of her real name. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement that things had shifted, that they were no longer simply bounty hunter and prisoner. As she settled into her blankets, still unchained, Jesse stood watch in the doorway of the ruined trading post. The desert night stretched endlessly before him, full of dangers both seen and unseen. He'd killed 3 men today, made enemies of powerful people, all for a woman who might still be lying to him. But when he glanced back and saw her sleeping, truly sleeping for perhaps the first time since he'd captured her, he found he didn't care. Some things were worth the risk, even if he wasn't quite ready to admit what those things were. The pine forest closed around them like a living wall. The sudden coolness a blessed relief after 2 days in the desert. Jesse breathed deeply, savoring the scent of resin and damp earth. They'd made good time from Maverick's Well, pushing hard through the heat. And now the mountains rose before them, the final barrier before Cedar Falls. Charlotte rode beside him now, no longer a prisoner in anything but name. He'd given her back her pistol that morning, watching as she checked it with practiced efficiency before holstering it. Trust, he was learning, was a gradual thing, built in small gestures and quiet moments. They were following a deer trail through the trees when the howling started. Long, mournful calls that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jesse's horse snorted nervously, ears flicking back and forth. "Wolves," Charlotte said quietly, her hand moving instinctively to her gun. "Pack sounds big." Jesse scanned the forest, catching glimpses of gray shadows moving between the trees. "They're pacing us." The trail opened into a small clearing, and Jesse made a quick decision. "We make our stand here, better than being strung out on the trail." They dismounted quickly, moving the horses to the center of the clearing. Jesse pulled his rifle, checking his ammunition. Beside him, Charlotte stood steady, pistol drawn, watching the tree line. The first wolf emerged slowly, massive and gray, yellow eyes fixed on them with predatory intelligence. Others followed, spreading out in a hunting formation. Jesse counted 8, maybe 9. "Too many. When I start shooting, you take the ones on the left," he said calmly. "Aim for center mass. Don't waste shots on moving targets." "Jesse!" Her voice was tight with fear. "There's too many. Then we'd better shoot straight." The alpha wolf lowered its head, muscles bunching for the charge. Jesse fired. The rifle's crack echoing through the forest. The wolf tumbled mid-leap, but the others came on. A wave of gray death. Charlotte's pistol barked beside him, steady and controlled. A wolf yelped and fell. Jesse worked his rifle's lever smoothly, picking targets, but they kept coming. One got past his guard, leaping for his throat. He swung the rifle like a club, catching it across the jaw, sending it tumbling. "Behind you!" Charlotte's warning came just in time. Jesse spun, firing from the hip, dropping a wolf that had circled behind them. But more kept coming, and his rifle clicked empty. He drew his Colt, but a wolf slammed into him, knocking him down. Fangs snapped inches from his face as he held it off with his forearm, feeling teeth tear through his coat. A gunshot rang out, and the wolf went limp. Charlotte stood over him, smoking pistol in hand. "Even now," she said with a shaky smile, helping him up. The remaining wolves circled warily, their boldness dampened by their losses. Jesse reloaded quickly, but the pack was already melting back into the forest, leaving their dead behind. "You all right?" he asked, checking her for injuries. "Better than you." She gestured at his torn and bloodied sleeve. "Let me look at that." They moved to a fallen log, and Charlotte carefully rolled up his sleeve. The bites weren't deep, but they needed cleaning. She used water from her canteen and a clean cloth from her saddlebag, working with gentle efficiency. "You've done this before," Jesse observed, trying not to think about how her touch made his skin tingle. "My father was a doctor. He taught me the basics." She tied off the bandage, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. "There, try not to get eaten by anything else today." They were close now. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, count the freckles across her nose. Something shifted in the air between them, a tension that had nothing to do with wolves or danger. "Charlotte," he began, not sure what he wanted to say. "We should go," she said quickly, standing and moving back to her horse. "Those wolves might come back with friends." They rode in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Jesse found himself watching her, noting the graceful way she sat her horse, the determined set of her jaw. When had she stopped being a prisoner and become what? He wasn't ready to put a name to it. They camped that night by a mountain stream, the sound of rushing water masking other noises. Jesse built a large fire, knowing it would keep predators at bay. They'd shot 2 rabbits earlier, and Charlotte proved she could do more than pour whiskey, seasoning the meat with wild herbs she'd gathered. "Tell me about your mother," she said as they ate. "You mentioned her before." Jesse stared into the fire, memories surfacing like ghosts. "She was beautiful. Came from a good family in Virginia, scandalized everyone by marrying my father, a nobody with big dreams and empty pockets. They came west together, built a little ranch in Colorado. What happened? Claim jumpers. The word tasted like ashes. Wanted our land for the water rights. When my father refused to sell, they came at night, killed her, strung him up for her murder. I was 12, hiding in the root cellar. Saw it all. Charlotte's hand found his in the darkness, squeezing gently. I'm sorry. Sheriff said there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. Turns out the claim jumpers had paid him off. That's when I learned what justice really means out here. He turned his hand over, interlacing their fingers. It means taking care of your own problems. Is that why you became a bounty hunter? For justice? Jessie laughed, but there was no humor in it. Started that way. Thought if the law wouldn't work for good people, maybe I could make it work. But somewhere along the way, it just became about the money, about surviving. And now, he looked at her then, firelight dancing across her features. Now I'm not sure about anything anymore. She held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Then she asked quietly, What are you going to do when we reach Cedar Falls tomorrow? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jessie knew what he should do. Turn her in, collect his bounty, move on to the next job. It's what he'd done 100 times before, but the thought of Charlotte in a cell, waiting for a noose or a corrupt trial, made his chest tight. I don't know, he admitted. If I run tonight, would you follow? Yes. Even though you believe I'm innocent? Because I believe you're innocent. Running would only make things worse. Charlotte, you need to trust the law. The law? She pulled her hand away, anger flashing in her eyes. The same law that let Blackwood whip me, that looks the other way while he steals and murders? That law. Not all lawmen are corrupt. Judge Patterson in Cedar Falls is a good man. Fair. Fair won't matter when Blackwood's money starts talking. She stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the firelight. I was a fool to think you understood. Jessie followed her, catching her arm gently. I do understand, more than you know, but running isn't the answer. You'll be looking over your shoulder forever. At least I'll be alive. Will you? What kind of life is that? Charlotte, always afraid, always alone. She turned to face him, tears glinting in her eyes. Better than the alternative. There's another way. The words came out before he could stop them. After the trial, after you're cleared, we could what, Jessie? Her voice was soft, vulnerable. What are you saying? He couldn't find the words. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into his touch, eyes fluttering closed. I'm saying maybe we're both tired of being alone, he whispered. The kiss was inevitable, like thunder after lightning. Soft at first, tentative, then deeper as she pressed against him, fingers tangling in his shirt. He tasted salt from her tears, felt the desperation in the way she clung to him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his chest. This is madness. Probably. He stroked her hair, marveling at its softness. Charlotte, let me help you. Let me find another way. There is no other way. But she didn't move from his arms. Tomorrow you'll take me to Cedar Falls, and Blackwood will have me killed before I ever see a courtroom. That's the reality. Not if I have anything to say about it? She pulled back to study his face. You'd risk everything? Your reputation? Your life? For me? Yes. The certainty in his own voice surprised him. Yes, I would. Something shifted in her expression then. A wall crumbling. She kissed him again, fierce and desperate. And he responded in kind, backing her against a tree. His hands tangled in her hair, pins scattering, golden waves tumbling free. Charlotte, he breathed against her lips. Don't. She silenced him with another kiss. Don't make promises you can't keep. Just give me tonight. They barely made it back to the bedrolls, clothes discarded in a trail behind them. In the flickering firelight, he saw the full extent of her scars, Not just her back, but arms, legs, evidence of a systematic cruelty that made rage burn in his chest. "Don't," she whispered, seeing his expression. "That's not who I am anymore." He kissed each scar like a benediction, a promise, until she was gasping beneath him, all thoughts of tomorrow forgotten. They came together with a desperate passion, two lonely souls finding solace in each other's arms. She cried out his name as pleasure overtook her, and he followed, burying his face in her neck. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. The fire had died to embers, but neither felt the cold. "I love you," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. "I know it's too soon, too impossible, but I do." Jesse tightened his arms around her. "Charlotte, shh, don't say it back. Not unless you mean it, not unless you're willing to prove it tomorrow." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've been dead inside for 15 years, just going through the motions, one bounty to the next. Then you came along and suddenly I remember what it feels like to be alive." She lifted her head to look at him. "Is that enough?" "It's everything," he said, and kissed her again. They made love once more as dawn approached, slow and tender this time, memorizing each touch as the sun painted the mountains gold. Jesse held her close, mind racing with plans and possibilities. Cedar Falls waited just over the next ridge. But maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't be riding in as bounty hunter and prisoner. Maybe they'd be riding in as something else entirely. The morning sun cast long shadows as Jesse and Charlotte descended the final ridge toward Cedar Falls. The town sprawled below them in the valley, larger than Jesse remembered, smoke rising from dozens of chimneys. The railroad had brought growth, and with it, complications. Jesse reined in his horse, his gut churning with indecision. Beside him, Charlotte sat straight-backed, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on her reins. "We could keep riding," she said quietly. "North to Canada, maybe, or west to California, somewhere Blackwood's reach doesn't extend." The temptation was overwhelming. After last night, after what they'd shared, every instinct screamed at him to protect her, to run. But Jesse knew the truth. They'd never stop running, and a life built on fear was no life at all. "No," he said finally. "We do this right, but not the way they expect." "What do you mean?" Jesse studied the town below, mind working. "There's a lawyer in Cedar Falls, Marcus Wellington. Used to be a judge back east before his wife's health brought them west. He's honest, far as lawyers go. We'll go to him first, before the sheriff." Hope flickered in Charlotte's eyes. "You think he'll help?" "If we can prove your story. Maybe. You said the real Evelyn Rose had documents. Do you know what happened to them?" Charlotte reached into her saddlebag, pulling out a worn leather portfolio. "I've been carrying them since that night. I was afraid to show anyone, afraid they'd just destroy them and me along with them." Jesse's heart leaped. "You've had evidence this whole time?" "Letters between Blackwood and his government contacts, bank records showing the diverted funds, even a signed confession from one of the Indian agents." She handed him the portfolio. "Evelyn died getting these out. I couldn't let them disappear." Jesse flipped through the documents. Excitement building. This changed everything. "Charlotte, this is enough to hang Blackwood twice over. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? A desperate woman claiming to have proof?" She shook her head. "I needed you to believe me first, to believe in me." He reached over, taking her hand. "I do. We're going to end this, Charlotte. Today." They rode into Cedar Falls by a back route Jesse knew, avoiding Main Street and the sheriff's office. Wellington's law office sat on a quiet side street, a modest building with clean windows and a freshly painted sign. Jesse helped Charlotte dismount, noting how her hands trembled. "Whatever happens, we face it together." She managed a weak smile. "Together." The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Marcus Wellington looked up from his desk, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire spectacles. "Mr. Hartman," he said, rising. "I heard you were bringing in the Rose woman, though I must say, I expected you to go straight to Sheriff Coleman. This is a special case, Mr. Wellington." Jesse closed the door firmly behind them. "We need your help. The lady's been falsely accused, and we can prove it." Wellington's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a claim. Please, sit. Tell me everything." For the next hour, Charlotte told her story while Jesse watched Wellington's expressions shift from skepticism to interest to outrage. When she produced the documents, the lawyer examined each one carefully, occasionally muttering under his breath. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "If these are genuine, and they appear to be, Theodore Blackwood has been systematically defrauding the government and murdering anyone who might expose him." "So you'll help us?" Charlotte asked eagerly. "My dear, I'll do more than that. These documents need to go directly to the federal marshal in Denver. But first, we need to keep you safe." Wellington stood, pacing. "Blackwood has men everywhere. The moment he learns you're in Cedar Falls—" A commotion outside cut him off. Jesse moved to the window, peering through the curtains. His blood ran cold. "Too late. Coleman's coming with a dozen deputies. The back door," Wellington said urgently. "My house is 3 streets over, blue shutters, white fence. My wife will hide you while I deal with this." But it was too late. The door burst open. Sheriff Coleman filling the frame, a big man with cruel eyes and Blackwood's money in his pocket. Well, Jesse Hartman. Heard you've been having some trouble on the trail." Coleman's eyes fixed on Charlotte. "Miss Rose, you're under arrest for murder. Come quietly now." "Sheriff, this woman has evidence of corruption and murder," Wellington said firmly. "I demand she be given a fair hearing before—" "You can demand all you want, lawyer man." Coleman spat tobacco juice on the clean floor. "I got a warrant and a job to do." Jesse stepped forward. "She's still my prisoner. Coleman, I brought her in. I'll see her to the jail myself." Coleman laughed. "Your bounty hunting days are over. Hartman, word is you killed 3 of Mr. Blackwood's associates. That makes you a murderer too." He nodded to his deputies. "Take them both." The deputies moved forward, but Jesse was already reaching for his gun. Charlotte's hand on his arm stopped him. "No," she said quietly. "No more killing. We do this the right way. Remember?" Jesse let them take his weapons, let them shackle his hands, but his eyes never left Coleman's face. "You're making a mistake, Sheriff. When the federal marshals see those documents—" "What documents?" Coleman smiled coldly. Wellington stepped forward. "I have them right here, and I'll be taking them straight to—" The gunshot was deafening in the small office. Wellington crumpled, blood spreading across his white shirt. Charlotte screamed. Jesse lunged forward but was clubbed down by a deputy's rifle butt. "Poor Mr. Wellington," Coleman said with mock sadness. "Killed by the desperate fugitive Evelyn Rose while trying to apprehend her. Terrible tragedy." "You bastard!" Charlotte struggled against the deputies holding her. "He was innocent. Lots of innocent people die. Miss Rose, way of the world." Coleman gathered up the documents from Wellington's desk, glancing through them. "Mr. Blackwood will be pleased to have these back. Been looking for them something fierce." They were dragged to the jail, Jesse's head still ringing from the blow. The cells were in the basement, damp and cold. They threw Jesse in one cell, Charlotte in another across the corridor. "Hanging set for tomorrow noon," Coleman said conversationally. "Mr. Blackwood is on his way to watch. Wants to make sure it's done right this time." After he left, Jesse tested the bars, the walls, looking for any weakness. Nothing. The cells were solid, built to hold desperate men. "Jesse?" Charlotte's voice came soft through the darkness. "I'm here. I'm sorry. I should have run when you gave me the chance." "No." He gripped the bars, needing to see her. "This isn't over. Wellington had a clerk. Someone must have seen." "Jesse?" Her voice was calm, resigned. "It's over. They won. Tomorrow they'll hang us both and Blackwood will go on stealing and killing." "Don't talk like that." "How should I talk? Like there's hope. Like someone's going to save us. He heard her bitter laugh. I've been running for 2 years. Jesse, I'm tired. At least I got to feel loved before the end. You gave me that. The words tore at him. Charlotte, listen to me. I've survived too much to die in this cell. We're getting out of here. How? Before he could answer, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Jesse tensed, expecting Coleman or his thugs. Instead, a small figure in a hooded cloak appeared. A woman, moving quickly to Charlotte's cell. My husband sent me, she whispered urgently. Before he died, told me to give you this. She pressed something through the bars, a key. Mrs. Wellington, Charlotte gasped. He made a copy months ago, said Coleman was corrupt, that someday someone would need it. The woman's voice broke. He was a good man. Don't let his death be for nothing. She vanished up the stairs as quickly as she'd come. Charlotte fumbled with the key, and Jesse heard the sweet sound of her lock clicking open. Moments later, she was at his cell, freeing him. We need to move fast, he whispered. They'll check on us soon. They crept up the stairs, Jesse leading. The sheriff's office above was empty. Coleman was probably at the saloon, celebrating his pending payday. Jesse quickly retrieved their weapons from the rack. Now what? Charlotte asked. The whole town will be after us. Jesse checked his Colt, mind racing. The telegraph office. We wire the federal marshals in Denver. Tell them everything. Then we fort up somewhere and wait for help. They slipped out the back, keeping to shadows. The telegraph office was only 2 blocks away, but it felt like miles. Every sound made them freeze. Every shadow could hide an enemy. The telegraph operator, a nervous young man named Timothy, nearly fainted when they burst in. I need to send an urgent message to Federal Marshal James Brennan in Denver, Jesse said, gun drawn but not quite pointing at the boy. Now, Timothy's hands shook as he worked the key. Jesse dictated quickly. Theodore Blackwood guilty of murder and federal fraud. Evidence destroyed by Sheriff Coleman, who murdered lawyer Wellington. Charlotte DeWitt, innocent. Send help immediately. Jesse Hartman, Cedar Falls. It's sent. Timothy squeaked. How long for a reply? Could be hours. Could be... The door exploded inward. Coleman stood there, face purple with rage. You son of a bitch! Jesse shoved Charlotte behind the counter as gunfire erupted. The window shattered, showering them with glass. Jesse fired back, driving Coleman into the street. Can't stay here, he shouted over the noise. The church, Charlotte said. Father Miguel won't turn us away. They ran through the chaos. Coleman's deputies converging from all directions. Bullets whined past, splintering wood and shattering windows. The church loomed ahead, its thick adobe walls promising sanctuary. Father Miguel, an old priest with kind eyes, opened the door without hesitation. Quickly, my children. Father, they'll tear this place apart. Jesse warned. Let them try. This is God's house. The priest barred the heavy door. You are under sanctuary. They cannot take you by force without committing sacrilege. Coleman and his men surrounded the church, shouting threats and demands, but even corrupt lawmen hesitated to violate sanctuary. The townspeople wouldn't stand for it, no matter what Coleman claimed. You're just delaying the inevitable. Hartman, Coleman shouted. Come out now, and maybe the woman doesn't suffer before she hangs. Jesse and Charlotte huddled in a pew, reloading their weapons. How long before the marshals come? She asked. Day and a half, maybe 2. Can we hold out that long? We'll have to. As night fell, Jesse could see torches through the windows. Coleman's men settling in for a siege. But for now, they were safe. For now, they had hope. He pulled Charlotte close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. I told you we'd find another way. It's not over yet, she whispered. No, he agreed. But we're together. That's what matters. Outside, Coleman raged and threatened. But inside the quiet church, Jesse held the woman he loved and dared to believe they might actually survive this. The real test would come with dawn, and with Theodore Blackwood himself. Dawn broke gray and cold over Cedar Falls. matching Jesse's mood as he watched through the church window. Coleman's men had maintained their siege through the night, taking shifts, keeping the church surrounded. But something had changed. The deputies were pulling back, creating a corridor. "Jesse!" Charlotte's hand found his shoulder. She hadn't slept either, though they'd taken turns keeping watch. "What are they doing?" His answer came in the form of a black carriage rolling down Main Street, expensive and out of place in the dusty town. Jesse's jaw tightened. "Blackwood's here." Theodore Blackwood stepped from the carriage like a king surveying his domain, even from a distance. Jesse could see the man's arrogance in every movement. Tall, silver-haired, immaculately dressed. The picture of Eastern respectability hiding Western brutality. Father Miguel joined them at the window. "That is the man you spoke of?" "That's him," Charlotte confirmed, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled. "The devil himself." Blackwood approached the church doors, stopping just outside. When he spoke, his cultured voice carried clearly, "Miss DeWitt, or do you prefer Miss Rose? I must say, you've led me quite a chase." Charlotte moved toward the door, but Jesse caught her arm. "Don't give him the satisfaction. Mr. Hartman," Blackwood continued, "the famous bounty hunter. I'm disappointed. I offered you triple your fee, and this is how you repay my generosity, with theft and murder. The only murderer here is you, Blackwood," Jesse called back. Blackwood laughed. "Such accusations. Do you have proof?" "Oh, wait, poor mister. Wellington had your so-called proof, didn't he? Terrible what happened. The man should have minded his own business. You won't get away with this?" Charlotte shouted. "The federal marshals!" "We'll find 2 fugitives who killed a respected lawyer while resisting arrest. Sheriff Coleman has witnesses. Several upstanding citizens saw you shoot poor Wellington." Blackwood's voice dropped, becoming almost conversational. "You see, my dear, I own this town. I own the territory. Soon, I'll own the state. Your little rebellion has been amusing, but it ends now." "Go to hell," Jesse snarled. "Eventually, I'm sure, but you'll arrive first." Blackwood stepped back. "Father Miguel, you're harboring murderers. I respect the sanctity of your church, but my patience has limits. You have 1 hour to surrender them, or I'll have no choice but to let Sheriff Coleman do his duty, sacred ground or not." The threat hung in the air as Blackwood returned to his carriage. Father Miguel crossed himself. He would truly violate sanctuary. "He's violated worse," Charlotte said quietly. "Father, you should leave. This isn't your fight." The old priest straightened. "Child, I've been fighting men like him my whole life. I won't abandon you now." Jesse's mind raced. They couldn't hold the church against a determined assault. The adobe walls were thick, but Coleman had dozens of men. And if Blackwood was willing to violate sanctuary, he'd already crossed a line most men wouldn't dare approach. "We need another plan," he said. "Father, is there another way out?" "The bell tower. It connects to the rectory next door through the attic. But they'll be watching." "Not up high, they won't." Jesse checked his ammunition. "Charlotte, you still have that Derringer?" She patted her boot. "Always?" "Good. Here's what we're going to do." 20 minutes later, Jesse crept across the rectory roof, Charlotte behind him. The connecting buildings provided cover from the street, and Coleman's men were focused on the church's main entrances. Below, Father Miguel maintained the pretense, moving past windows, keeping the lamps lit. They dropped into an alley behind the general store. Jesse had gambled that Blackwood would keep his men concentrated on the church, leaving other areas of town less guarded. So far, the gamble was paying off. "The livery stable," Jesse whispered. "We get horses and ride hard for Denver. It's our only chance." They moved through back alleys, avoiding Main Street. The town was eerily quiet. Blackwood had likely ordered citizens to stay indoors. Good. Fewer witnesses, fewer complications. The livery stable stood at the town's edge, large doors invitingly open. Too inviting. Jesse's instincts screamed danger, but they had no choice. They needed horses. They slipped inside, the familiar smells of hay and horse sweat enveloping them. Jesse moved to the stalls, selecting 2 strong mounts. They were saddling the second when a voice froze them. "Going somewhere?" Samuel Cobb stepped from the shadows. Not the Cobb from the desert. This was his brother, Matthew. Same cold eyes, same predatory smile. "Heard you killed Sam," Matthew said conversationally. "Can't say I'm surprised. He always was careless. Me? I'm more careful." Jesse pushed Charlotte behind him. "We've got no quarrel with you. Cobb, you killed my brother. That makes it personal." Matthew's hand hovered near his gun. "Though Blackwood's paying me enough to make it professional, too." "Your brother was scum," Charlotte said suddenly. "Just like you, just like Blackwood. You prey on the innocent and call it business." Matthew's smile widened. "Lady's got fire. I see why Sam wanted to take his time with you. Maybe I'll—" Jesse drew and fired in one motion. Months of practice condensed into a heartbeat. Matthew Cobb looked surprised as the bullet took him center mass. His gun cleared leather but never rose, falling from nerveless fingers as he collapsed. "Mount up," Jesse said tersely. "That shot will bring them running." They burst from the stable at full gallop, heading north toward the mountain road. Behind them, shouts erupted as Coleman's men realized their prey had escaped. Jesse looked back to see riders pouring from the town, Blackwood's carriage in their midst. The race was on. They pushed the horses hard, trading speed for endurance. The mountain road was treacherous but offered cover, trees and rocks to break line of sight, curves to gain distance. Jesse knew these mountains, had hunted men through them before, but never while being hunted himself. "They're gaining," Charlotte called out, looking back. Jesse saw them too, at least 20 riders. Coleman's bulk visible in the lead. They had fresher horses. Knew Jesse's destination? It would be close. The road forked ahead. The main path led to Denver, wide and well-traveled. The other was barely a trail, winding higher into the peaks. "This way!" Jesse turned onto the narrow trail, Charlotte following without hesitation. The path climbed steeply, forcing them to slow. But it also forced their pursuers to string out, unable to bunch up for volume of fire. Jesse's strategy became clear as they reached a narrow defile between 2 cliff faces. "Keep going," he shouted, dismounting. "I'll hold them here." "I'm not leaving you. Charlotte, please, someone has to reach Denver. Tell the marshals what happened. Go!" She hesitated, then leaned down to kiss him fierce and quick. "Don't you dare die on me, Jesse Hartman." Then she was gone, spurring her horse up the trail. Jesse positioned himself behind a boulder, checking his rifle and pistol. The defile was perfect. They'd have to come at him 2 at a time at most. The first riders appeared, saw him, tried to retreat. Jesse's rifle cracked, sending one tumbling from his saddle. The others pulled back, shouting warnings. "Hartman!" Coleman's voice echoed off the cliffs. "You're just delaying the inevitable." "Maybe," Jesse called back. "But I'm taking some of you with me." They tried rushing him twice, both times. Jesse's deadly accurate fire drove them back, leaving bodies in the narrow pass. But his ammunition wouldn't last forever, and they knew it. During a lull, Jesse heard something that made his blood run cold. Charlotte's scream, echoing from higher up the mountain. They'd sent men around. Cut her off. Rage flooded through him. He'd failed her, failed to protect the one person who'd made him feel alive again. "Sounds like we got your woman." "Hartman," Coleman taunted. "Surrender now, and maybe she lives." Jesse closed his eyes, seeing her face, remembering her touch. Then he stood, stepping out from cover, weapons raised. The volley of gunfire was deafening, but it didn't come from Coleman's men. New riders poured into the defile from behind, wearing the distinctive badges of federal marshals. Coleman's men, caught between Jesse and the marshals, threw down their weapons in confusion. "Nobody move," Marshal James Brennan's voice boomed with authority. "You're all under arrest." Jesse sagged against the boulder, hardly believing it. They'd come, somehow, impossibly. They'd come in time. "Where's Blackwood?" he asked as Brennan approached. "Being arrested as we speak. Your telegram started quite the investigation. Seems Washington's been looking for an excuse to deal with Mr. Blackwood for some time." Brennan studied him. "You're Jesse Hartman?" "Yes, sir. But Charlotte, Miss DeWitt. They grabbed her. Easy, son. My men are all over this mountain. We'll find her." The next hour blurred together. Coleman and his surviving deputies were shackled and loaded into prison wagons. Blackwood, his dignity shattered, was dragged past in irons, no longer the untouchable power he'd been. But Charlotte was nowhere to be found. Jesse searched frantically, calling her name until his voice went hoarse. The marshals found her horse, abandoned higher up the trail. Some signs of struggle. Then nothing. As darkness began to fall, Jesse stood at the edge of a cliff, staring into the void below. If she'd fallen, if they'd thrown her. "Jesse?" He spun around. Charlotte emerged from the trees, dirty and bruised but alive. She was accompanied by a marshal who looked somewhat worse for wear. "Found her holed up in a cave," the marshal explained. "Had my own gun on me before I could identify myself. Lady's got some fight in her." Jesse crossed the distance in 3 strides, crushing her against him. She was real, solid, alive. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered into her hair. "Takes more than Blackwood's thugs to kill a DeWitt," she said, but her voice shook. "Is it over? Really over?" "It's over. Blackwood's finished. You're free." She pulled back to look at him. "We're free, Jesse. Both of us." Marshal Brennan cleared his throat. "Miss DeWitt, Mr. Hartman, I'll need full statements from both of you, but given what we've uncovered about Blackwood's operation, I think it's safe to say all charges against you will be dropped. Ma'am, as for you, Hartman, self-defense is a valid plea, especially given the circumstances." "Thank you, Marshal." "Don't thank me. Thank that young telegraph operator who kept sending your message to every federal office he could reach. Brave boy." Brennan tipped his hat. "We'll make camp here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll escort you both to Denver for the formal proceedings." As the marshals set up camp, Jesse and Charlotte found a quiet spot overlooking the valley. Cedar Falls lay below, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. "What happens now?" Charlotte asked. "After Denver, after the trial?" Jesse was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've been thinking about California. Maybe buy some land, try ranching. It's honest work. Sounds lonely. It would be, unless—" He turned to her. "Unless I had a wife to share it with." Charlotte's breath caught. "Jesse Hartman, is that a proposal?" "It's a question. I'm not much. Charlotte, just a broken-down bounty hunter with too many ghosts. But I love you, and if you'll have me—" She silenced him with a kiss. When they broke apart, she was crying and smiling at the same time. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you foolish, wonderful man. Though I should point out you're proposing to an accused murderess." "Former accused murderess," he corrected. "Soon-to-be respectable rancher's wife. I like the sound of that." They stayed there as night fell completely, holding each other, planning a future neither had dared imagine just days before. Below them, Cedar Falls went about its business, unaware that its corrupt heart had been cut out, that justice had finally come to the desert. It wasn't the ending Jesse had expected when he'd taken the bounty on Evelyn Rose, but as Charlotte snuggled closer, fitting perfectly against his side, he knew it was the ending he'd been searching for all his life. The hunter had found his home at last. The abandoned cabin materialized out of the swirling snow like a ghost from Jesse's past. He'd used it before as a hideout, years ago when he was tracking the Morrison gang. Now it would serve as sanctuary from both the storm and their pursuers. "Inside, quick!" he urged Charlotte, half carrying her through the deepening drifts. She was shivering violently, her lips tinged blue from the cold. The cabin was as he remembered. One room, sparse but solid. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A narrow bed frame stood in the corner. and shelves held a few supplies previous occupants had left behind. Jesse immediately set about starting a fire while Charlotte huddled on the bed, teeth chattering. "We need to get you warm," he said once the flames caught. "Those wet clothes will kill you faster than any bullet." She nodded, fingers fumbling with buttons. Jesse turned his back, giving her privacy while he checked their supplies. The storm had caught them after they'd fled Denver, Marshal Brennan's warnings ringing in their ears. Blackwood had escaped during the prison transport, killed 2 marshals and vanished. Worse, he'd posted a $10,000 bounty on their heads, dead or alive.
"Jesse,"
Charlotte's voice was small.
"I can't. My fingers won't work."
He turned to find her struggling with her dress, hands shaking too badly to manage. Without a word, he moved to help, gently working the buttons free. His own hands trembled, but not from cold. "This isn't how I imagined undressing you again," he said, trying for levity. She managed a weak laugh, less romantic than last time. He wrapped her in the dusty blankets from the bed, then shed his own wet coat and shirt. The fire was growing stronger, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jesse pulled Charlotte against him, sharing body heat, feeling her gradually stop shaking. "How did he escape?" she asked after a while. "Brennan had him surrounded. Money buys a lot of loyalty. Someone on the inside, probably. Blackwood's had years to build his network." Jesse stroked her damp hair. "But he made a mistake coming after us himself. He's not hiding behind the law anymore. He'll never stop." Charlotte's voice was hollow. "Not until we're dead. We should have gone to California when we had the chance." "Hey," Jesse tilted her chin up. "We're not dead yet, and Theodore Blackwood is about to learn what happens when you corner a wolf." They spent the rest of the day in the cabin, waiting out the storm. Jesse melted snow for water, found some preserved meat and hardtack in the supplies. Not much, but enough to keep them going. As night fell, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows and sending snow through every tiny gap. Charlotte had developed a fever. Not severe, but enough to worry him. She drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally murmuring things that made no sense. Jesse kept her close, monitoring her temperature, cursing himself for letting her get so cold.
"My fault,"
she muttered at one point.
Should have let him."
"Shh." Jesse pressed his lips to her burning forehead. "No more of that. Rest now." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world transformed into pristine white. Charlotte's fever had broken, though she was still weak. Jesse made the difficult decision to stay put another day, let her recover strength, but he kept his weapons close, watching the tree line through the frost-covered windows. It was late afternoon when he saw the riders, 5 of them, moving carefully through the snow, following the same trail Jesse and Charlotte had taken. Even at distance, he recognized the lead rider's arrogant posture. Blackwood. "Charlotte, wake up." Jesse shook her gently. "We've got company." She came alert instantly, reaching for the pistol he'd placed beside the bed. "How many?" 5. Blackwood's leading them. "Then we make our stand here." Jesse wanted to argue, wanted to bundle her onto a horse and run. But where would they go? The snow would slow them, make them easy targets. And he was tired of running. "There's an old mine shaft about 100 yards behind the cabin," he said. "If this goes bad, we fight together or not at all." The determination in her eyes brooked no argument. Jesse positioned himself at the window with his rifle, while Charlotte took the side window with her pistol. The riders had stopped at the tree line, probably discussing strategy. "Hartman," Blackwood's voice carried clearly across the snow. "I know you're in there. Save us all some trouble and come out. I promise to make it quick." "Go to hell." "Blackwood," Jesse called back. "Already been. That's where I met your lady friend. Remember? Though she was less friendly then, more resistant." Jesse felt Charlotte tense beside him, old trauma surfacing. He put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Ancient history. Blackwood. You've got no power here." "Don't I?" Blackwood laughed. I've got 5 men to your 1, and your whore is probably half frozen. Surrender her, and I might let you walk away." Interesting offer. Jesse sighted down his rifle. "Here's my counter." His shot took one of Blackwood's men out of the saddle. The others scattered, diving for cover as Jesse worked the rifle's lever, sending another shot into the trees. Return fire shattered the window, showering them with glass. Charlotte fired back, her shots disciplined and careful. Jesse saw another rider fall. "3 down," he muttered. 2 plus Blackwood to go. "Jesse!" Charlotte's warning came just as the back door exploded inward. One of Blackwood's men had circled around. Jesse spun, firing from the hip, catching the man in the chest, but not before the attacker got a shot off. Charlotte cried out, clutching her side as red bloomed across her shirt. "No!" Jesse caught her as she fell, rage flooding through him. He could hear Blackwood's men regrouping outside, preparing for another assault.
"Just a graze,"
Charlotte gasped, though her face was white with pain.
"I'm okay."
Jesse knew better. The wound was deep, bleeding freely. She needed a doctor, needed help he couldn't provide. "Stay with me," he whispered, pressing his hand against the wound. "Don't you dare leave me now."
"Jesse,"
her voice was growing weak.
"the letters in my bag, everything about Blackwood. Make sure someone knows."
"Stop talking like that." The front door burst open. Jesse turned, raising his pistol, but Blackwood was already too close. The railroad baron's shot went wide as Jesse's found its mark, but Blackwood's momentum carried him forward, crashing into Jesse. They went down hard, grappling for the gun. Blackwood was bigger, fresher, but Jesse fought with desperate fury. They rolled across the floor, each trying to gain advantage. Jesse's hand found a piece of broken glass, and he drove it into Blackwood's shoulder. The man howled, loosening his grip just enough for Jesse to break free. They faced each other, both breathing hard, both wounded. "It's over, Blackwood," Jesse said. "Your men are dead. You're finished." "Not yet." Blackwood pulled a derringer from his vest. "Not until she's dead. Not until I've erased every trace of what she knows." Time seemed to slow. Jesse saw Blackwood turning toward Charlotte, saw her trying to raise her own gun with trembling hands. Without thought, Jesse threw himself between them. The derringer cracked. Jesse felt the impact, the burn of lead in his chest, but his own gun was steady as he put 2 bullets into Theodore Blackwood's black heart. The railroad baron looked surprised as he fell, as if he couldn't believe someone like Jesse could kill him. He was dead before he hit the floor. Jesse collapsed beside Charlotte, his own blood mingling with hers on the cabin floor. She was crying, trying to reach him.
"No, no, no,"
she sobbed.
"Jesse, please. Hey."
He managed to catch her hand. "We got him. It's finished."
"Don't leave me. Please don't leave me."
Not going anywhere, but the darkness was creeping in at the edges of his vision. "Love you, Charlotte. Always have, since that first night by the fire. I love you too. Stay with me. Help will come." Jesse wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe they'd somehow survive this, build that ranch in California, live the life they dreamed of. But his strength was fading, the cold creeping in despite the fire. "Promise me," he whispered. "Promise you'll live. Be happy. For both of us. Don't you dare give up. Jesse Hartman, don't you dare." But the darkness took him before he could hear the rest. Jesse floated in a gray void, neither alive nor dead. Sometimes he heard voices, Charlotte calling his name, strangers speaking in hushed tones. Once, he could have sworn he heard his mother singing the lullaby she used to sing when he was small. Time had no meaning in the gray place. He drifted, occasionally surfacing toward consciousness, only to sink back down. The only constant was pain, a burning in his chest that anchored him to life even as he wished to let go. Then, finally, light, real light, not the gray half-existence he'd been trapped in. Jesse's eyes fluttered open to find himself in a bed, a real bed with clean sheets. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains. "Jesse?" He turned his head, the simple movement exhausting. Charlotte sat beside him, her face thin and pale, but beautifully alive. Her own wound was bandaged. He could see the bulk of it under her dress. "Hey," he croaked, throat dry as desert sand. She burst into tears, carefully leaning over to kiss him. "You stupid, wonderful man. You've been unconscious for 2 weeks. I thought, the doctor said, takes more than Blackwood to kill a Hartman." He tried to sit up, gasped as pain lanced through him. "Where are we?" "Fort Collins. Some trappers found us the day after the fight. The marshal here is honest. He's already sent word that we're to be left alone. Blackwood's death closed a lot of cases. And you're okay?" "Thanks to you." She touched the bandages on her side. "The doctor says I'll have an impressive scar, but I'll heal. We both will." Jesse reached up to touch her face, marveling that they were both still breathing. "California. As soon as you can travel. I've already been looking at land prices. There's a beautiful valley near Sacramento, good water, perfect for cattle." She smiled through her tears. "I've become quite the expert on ranching while you were sleeping." "Marry me first," Jesse said. "Before we go, I want to do this right." "Jesse Hartman, you've already proposed once." "The answer is still yes." "I mean now. Today. I don't want to wait another minute to call you my wife." Charlotte laughed, the sound like music after so much darkness. "You can barely sit up. I don't think you're in any condition for a wedding. Bring the preacher here then. Charlotte, I've spent too much of my life waiting for the right moment. Nearly dying teaches you there's no such thing." He squeezed her hand. "Marry me, right here, right now, before anything else can go wrong." She studied his face, then nodded. "All right, though you're going to make a very disreputable groom in that nightshirt. And you'll be the most beautiful bride Colorado's ever seen, even with a bullet scar." 3 hours later, the local preacher stood at Jesse's bedside while Charlotte, wearing her only clean dress, held Jesse's hand. The doctor and his wife served as witnesses. It wasn't the wedding either had imagined, but it was theirs. "Do you, Jesse Hartman, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part?" Jesse looked at Charlotte, seeing not the wanted woman he'd captured, but the partner who'd stood beside him against all odds. "I do. Do you, Charlotte DeWitt, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, till death do you part?" "I do," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Then by the power vested in me by the state of Colorado, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Their kiss was gentle, mindful of injuries, but full of promise. When they parted, Jesse saw his own joy reflected in Charlotte's eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Hartman," he said softly. "Hello, husband." She settled carefully beside him on the bed, fitting against his side like she belonged there. "Now rest. We have a long journey ahead of us, and I need you strong." Jesse closed his eyes, feeling peace for the first time in memory. The past was behind them. Blackwood dead. Charlotte's name cleared. Their love tested and proven. Ahead lay California and a new life. One built on truth instead of lies. Love instead of fear. He'd been a hunter all his life. Now, finally, he could stop hunting and start living, with Charlotte's hand in his and her steady breathing beside him. Jesse Hartman slipped into healing sleep, dreaming of golden hills and a future bright with promise. The Denver courthouse stood imposing in the morning sun, its stone steps crowded with reporters, curious citizens, and armed federal marshals. Jesse helped Charlotte from the carriage, noting how she held her head high despite the whispers that followed them. 6 weeks had passed since their wedding, since Blackwood's death, but the formal hearings had been delayed while prosecutors built their case against his network. "Ready for this?" Jesse asked quietly. Charlotte squeezed his arm. "I've been ready for 2 years." Inside, the courtroom was packed. Jesse recognized several faces from Cedar Falls, including young Timothy, the telegraph operator who'd risked everything to send their message. Marshal Brennan nodded to them from his position near the judge's bench. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison Walsh, had warned them this would be difficult. Even with Blackwood dead, his influence lingered. Several witnesses had already recanted their statements. Others had simply disappeared. But Charlotte's documents, recovered from her saddlebags, provided a paper trail that was hard to dispute. All rise for the Honorable Judge William Thornberry. The bailiff called. Judge Thornberry was new to Denver, brought in specially from Philadelphia to ensure impartiality. His reputation for fairness and immunity to bribes had preceded him. As he settled behind the bench, his stern gaze swept the courtroom. We're here to examine the charges against Mrs. Charlotte Hartman, formerly known as Charlotte DeWitt and wrongly identified as Evelyn Rose. He began. Mr. Walsh, please present your findings. For the next 2 hours, Walsh methodically laid out the evidence. The forged documents that had transformed Charlotte into Evelyn Rose, the testimony of the hotel owner who'd seen Blackwood leaving the real Evelyn's room the night she died, bank records showing payments to Sheriff Coleman and others. Charlotte took the stand after lunch, Jesse watching anxiously as she faced the crowded courtroom. She spoke clearly and without embellishment, detailing her discovery of Blackwood's crimes, his threats, the night Evelyn Rose died trying to help her escape. Tell us about the whipping, Mrs. Hartman, Walsh said gently. Charlotte's hand moved unconsciously to her back. Blackwood had me taken to his estate. He said I needed to learn my place. Her voice faltered for the first time. He had his men hold me down while he personally administered 20 lashes, said it was a lesson in obedience. And yet you continued to resist him? Some things are worth more than comfort. Mr. Walsh, worth more than safety. The truth is one of them. The defense attorney, a oily man named Corbett, who'd clearly been paid well by Blackwood's remaining associates, stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Hartman, isn't it true you worked in a saloon when Mr. Jesse Hartman found you? I worked as a barmaid to survive while in hiding. Yes. A woman of supposed virtue, serving drinks to miners and cowboys? Corbett's tone dripped disdain. And we're to believe you were simply an innocent bookkeeper? Jesse's hands clenched, but Charlotte remained calm. I've never claimed to be a saint, Mr. Corbett. I've done what I needed to survive, but I've never murdered anyone, never stolen anything except my own freedom. Yet you fled justice for 2 years. An innocent person would have trusted the law. Charlotte laughed bitterly. The same law that let Blackwood operate openly? That looked the other way while he stole government funds and murdered those who opposed him? Yes, I fled, because I knew the law was for sale, and Blackwood was buying. The questioning continued for hours, Corbett trying every angle to discredit her, but Charlotte held firm, answering each challenge with quiet dignity. When she finally stepped down, the courtroom was silent. Other witnesses followed. The elderly lawyer, Josiah Bentley, who'd known Charlotte's father and confirmed her identity. A former employee of Blackwood's who'd found the courage to testify about the systematic fraud. Even Mrs. Wellington, the murdered lawyer's widow, took the stand to describe how her husband had died trying to protect the evidence. On the second day, a surprise witness arrived, Margaret Blackwood, Theodore's estranged sister. She'd traveled from Boston with her own collection of documents, letters her brother had written boasting of his crimes, assuming family loyalty would keep them secret. My brother was a monster, she said simply. I've stayed silent too long, but Mrs. Hartman's courage inspired me to finally speak. Theodore destroyed everyone who stood in his way. It's time his victims had justice. By the third day, Corbett's defense had crumbled. His final argument was weak, focusing on technicalities rather than refuting the mountain of evidence. When he sat down, defeat was written on his face. Judge Thornberry retired to consider his verdict. The wait was agony. Jesse held Charlotte's hand tightly, feeling her tremble despite her composed expression. Around them, the courtroom buzzed with speculation. After 2 hours, the judge returned. The courtroom fell silent. In the matter of the charges against Charlotte Hartman, Judge Thornbury began. This court finds the defendant not guilty of all charges. Furthermore, this court recognizes that Mrs. Hartman was the victim of an elaborate conspiracy orchestrated by Theodore Blackwood to conceal his own crimes. Charlotte sagged against Jessie, tears of relief streaming down her face, but the judge wasn't finished. This court also commends Mrs. Hartman for her courage in preserving evidence of widespread corruption. Her actions, and those of her husband, Jesse Hartman, have exposed a criminal network that reached the highest levels of territorial government. Mrs. Hartman, you are not only free of all charges, you are owed a debt of gratitude by the people of Colorado. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered. Others, Blackwood's remaining supporters, shouted angrily. The marshals quickly restored order, but the sentiment was clear. Charlotte had won. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Jessie shielded Charlotte as they pushed through the crowd, but she stopped on the steps, turning to face them.
I want to say something, she told Jessie. Charlotte, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She faced the crowd, voice carrying clearly. For 2 years, I lived in fear. I hid. I ran. I nearly died because one powerful man believed he was above the law. But I'm standing here today because good people, my husband, Marshall Brennan, Judge Thornbury, and many others, still believe in justice. Theodore Blackwood is dead, but men like him still exist. They count on our fear, our silence. Don't give it to them. Stand up. Speak out. The truth is more powerful than all their money and threats combined. The crowd stirred, some nodding, others looking uncomfortable. Jessie saw several well-dressed men slip away, probably to report to their own corrupt masters. Charlotte had just painted a target on their backs again, but he'd never been prouder of her. That evening, in their hotel room, Charlotte finally allowed herself to collapse. The strength that had carried her through the trial evaporated, leaving her shaking with delayed reaction. It's over, she kept repeating. It's really over. Jessie held her close, stroking her hair. You were magnificent today. Your father would have been proud. I kept thinking about Evelyn, Charlotte said softly. The real Evelyn Rose. She died trying to help me. Her sister was in the courtroom today. Did you see her? She thanked me afterward, said knowing the truth about who killed her sister brought peace. You honored her memory. Blackwood wanted her to disappear, forgotten. Instead, her story helped bring him down. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then, Jessie, I've been thinking. The judge mentioned a reward for the evidence I provided. $20,000. Jessie whistled low. That's a fortune. It's enough to buy that ranch in California and have plenty left over, but... She looked up at him. What if we used some of it differently? What if we started a fund, something to help other women escape situations like mine, women who need to disappear, start over, but don't have the means? Jessie studied his wife's face. Seeing the determination there, she'd survived hell and come out stronger, but she hadn't forgotten those still trapped. I think that's a fine idea, he said. The Charlotte Hartman Fund for Women's Freedom has a nice ring to it. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen all day. I was thinking the Evelyn Rose Foundation. She deserves to be remembered. Even better. They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Jessie answered it cautiously, hand on his gun, to find Marshall Brennan standing in the hallway. Sorry to disturb you folks, Brennan said. Thought you should know. We arrested 14 more of Blackwood's associates today based on the trial testimony. The whole network is collapsing. He handed Jessie an envelope. This came for you through official channels, from California. Jessie opened it curiously. Inside was a deed to 640 acres in the Sacramento Valley, along with a note. Mr. and Mrs. Hartman, heard about your troubles and your plans. This land belonged to my late husband, who would have wanted it to go to folks who'd appreciate it. Consider it a wedding gift from one widow to a couple who fought for justice. Mrs. Sarah Morrison. Morrison, Jessie said slowly. I tracked her husband once. He was guilty as sin, But I saw how she struggled after he was hanged. I sent her money when I could, anonymously. And now she's returning the kindness. Charlotte said wonderingly, Jesse, this is perfect. We can leave tomorrow if you want. But Jesse was looking out the window at the Denver streets, his expression thoughtful. Actually, I was thinking we might stay a few more days. Help the marshals round up the rest of Blackwood's men, make sure the job's finished properly. Charlotte smiled, understanding. The hunter in him would never completely disappear, but now it served justice instead of just survival. A few days, she agreed. But then California. We have a ranch to build, a foundation to establish, and a life to live. Together, Jesse said, pulling her close. Together, she confirmed. The next days were a whirlwind of activity. Jesse worked with the marshals, his knowledge of the territory invaluable in tracking down fleeing criminals. Charlotte met with lawyers and bankers, setting up the Evelyn Rose Foundation with an initial endowment of $5,000. Several women approached her during those days, some openly, others in secret. Women trapped in bad situations, women who needed help escaping. Charlotte listened to each story, made arrangements, provided funds. The foundation's first success was helping a young woman escape from a brothel where she was being held against her will. You're going to run out of money before we even reach California, Jesse teased one evening. Then we'll raise more. Charlotte said simply, Jesse, I know what it's like to have nowhere to turn. If I can spare even one woman that desperation. He kissed her forehead. I know. It's one of the many reasons I love you. Finally. The day came to leave Denver. They'd bought a sturdy wagon for the journey, loaded with supplies and hope. As they prepared to depart, a small crowd gathered to see them off. People Charlotte had helped. Marshals Jesse had worked with. Even young Timothy, who shyly presented Charlotte with a bouquet of wildflowers. You'll write, won't you? Mrs. Wellington asked, clasping Charlotte's hands. Let us know how you're doing. Of course. And the foundation will need Eastern representatives. Perhaps you'd consider. The older woman's eyes lit up. I'd be honored. Marcus would have loved knowing his death led to something so positive. As their wagon rolled out of Denver, Jesse took Charlotte's hand. No regrets? None, she said firmly. We faced the worst and survived. Whatever comes next, we'll handle it. Together, Jesse said, their private promise. Always together. Charlotte agreed. The mountains gave way to plains, then desert, then mountains again. Each mile took them further from their past and closer to their future. Sometimes they were silent, comfortable in each other's company. Other times, Charlotte would sing old songs her mother had taught her, her voice carrying across the empty landscape. They stopped in small towns along the way, always alert for trouble but finding only curiosity and occasional recognition. Word of the trial had spread. Some places welcomed them as heroes, others were cooler, suspicious of anyone who'd challenged the established order. But no one tried to stop them. One evening, camped beside a clear mountain stream, Charlotte said suddenly, I'm with child. Jesse, who'd been tending the fire, nearly fell over. What? When? How do you know? She laughed at his stammering. I suspect you know how. Jesse Hartman. As for when, probably our wedding night. I wasn't sure until recently, but all the signs are there. He moved to her side, hand hovering over her still flat stomach. A baby. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy? Jesse pulled her into his arms. Charlotte, I never thought I'd have any of this. Love, a wife, a future, and now a child? I'm more than happy. I'm complete. They held each other as the stars came out, planning additions to their unbuilt house, debating names, dreaming of the life they'd give their child. A life free of fear, full of love and possibility. Thank you, Jesse said softly. For what? For not giving up, for fighting when it would have been easier to surrender, for showing me that life was worth more than just surviving. Charlotte kissed him gently. Thank you for believing in me when I'd lost faith in everyone, for risking everything to protect me, for loving me despite all the complications I brought into your life. Because of them, not despite them, Jesse corrected. Every scar, every tear, every hard choice. They made you who you are, and who you are is exactly who I want beside me for the rest of my life. They made love under the stars, gentle and unhurried, celebrating their survival and their future. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and each other, they watched meteors streak across the sky. Make a wish, Charlotte said. Don't need to. I've got everything I want right here. Make one anyway. For the baby. Jesse closed his eyes, thinking, I wish for our child to know peace. To grow up in a world where justice means something, where truth matters more than money or power. That's a big wish. Then we'd better get started making it come true. Charlotte smiled, snuggling closer. Tomorrow, tonight, let's just be Jesse and Charlotte, two people who found each other against all odds. I can do that, Jesse agreed, pulling her close. As they drifted towards sleep, a coyote howled in the distance, that same lonely, defiant sound Jesse remembered from their first night together. But now it didn't sound lonely at all. It sounded like freedom, like possibility, like home. The hunter and his bride slept peacefully under the vast western sky, their greatest adventures still ahead of them. The Sacramento Valley stretched before them like a golden promise, grass rippling in waves under the afternoon sun. Jesse pulled the wagon to a stop at the crest of the hill, his heart full as he surveyed what would become their home. There it is, he said quietly. 640 acres of possibility. Charlotte stood beside him, one hand on her growing belly, the other shading her eyes. The land rolled gently down to a creek lined with cottonwoods, perfect for irrigation. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the sky. It's beautiful, she breathed. Jesse, it's perfect. They'd been traveling for 2 months since leaving Denver, and Charlotte was beginning to show. The journey had been easier than expected, though Jesse remained vigilant. Blackwood's network had crumbled, but revenge had a way of reaching across miles and years. They made camp by the creek that first night, too excited to drive the remaining miles to the abandoned homestead that came with the land. Jesse caught fish while Charlotte gathered herbs, both marveling at the richness of their new home. I've been thinking about the house, Charlotte said over dinner. Nothing too grand, just solid, with big windows facing east to catch the morning sun, a good kitchen, a parlor for guests, and extra bedrooms. Extra? Planning on more than one little one? She smiled mysteriously. We'll see what God provides, but the foundation should support our families. Jesse nodded, understanding. The Evelyn Rose Foundation had already helped a dozen women escape dangerous situations. Charlotte corresponded regularly with Mrs. Wellington in Denver, coordinating efforts. Even here, in their new Eden, the work would continue. The next weeks were a blur of activity. Jesse hired local men to help raise the house while he focused on fencing and preparing for cattle. Charlotte, despite his protests, insisted on helping where she could, planning the garden, organizing supplies, charming their new neighbors at the nearest town's general store. The house came together quickly, just as Charlotte had envisioned. Nothing fancy, but solid and welcoming, with a wide porch perfect for watching sunsets. Jesse built the furniture himself, taking pride in each piece. Charlotte sewed curtains and quilts, turning the structure into a home. One morning, 3 months after their arrival, Jesse was working on the barn when he heard horses approaching. His hand went automatically to his gun before he recognized the rider, Marshall Brennan, dusty from hard travel. Marshall, Jesse said warily. Long way from Denver. That it is, Brennan dismounted, accepting the water Jesse offered. Not here officially. Well, not entirely. Wanted to see how you folks were settling in. Charlotte emerged from the house, flour dusting her apron. Marshall Brennan, you're just in time for lunch. Over Charlotte's fresh bread and venison stew, Brennan filled them in on news from Denver. Most of Blackwood's associates were now in prison. The territorial government had undergone major reforms. The Evelyn Rose Foundation had gained official recognition and support. Actually, Brennan said, reaching into his saddlebag, I have something for you both.
He produced an official-looking document. Jesse read it, eyebrows rising. It was a full presidential pardon for any and all crimes committed in the pursuit of justice against Theodore Blackwood, signed by President Grant himself. The Attorney General felt it was appropriate. Brennan explained, "Given the service you both provided in exposing corruption, you're completely clear, both of you. No one can ever use your past against you." Charlotte took the document with trembling hands. "We're truly free." "Free and honored. There's talk of a commendation, but I figured you'd prefer the quiet life out here." "You figured right," Jesse said firmly. "We've had enough of fame and danger." Brennan smiled. "Thought so, but Jesse, I did want to ask. We could use men like you as deputies or marshals. The pay's good, and you'd be serving justice the right way." Jesse glanced at Charlotte, saw the understanding in her eyes. "Thanks, Marshal, but no, I've got everything I need right here. The only hunting I plan to do now is for strays from my own herd." "Fair enough. Can't say I'm surprised." Brennan stood to leave. "You've built something good here. Both of you. Be proud of it." After he left, Jesse found Charlotte in what would be the nursery, running her hands over the crib he'd just finished. "Any regrets?" she asked softly. "You could have been a marshal, had adventures, made a name for yourself." Jesse wrapped his arms around her from behind, hands resting on her swollen belly. "I've had enough adventures for 3 lifetimes, and I've got a name, yours. That's all I need." The baby kicked, and they both laughed. "I think someone agrees," Charlotte said. Summer turned to autumn, the valley transforming into a tapestry of gold and red. Jesse's small herd of cattle grew, and Charlotte's garden produced abundantly. They hired a few hands, good men looking for honest work, and the ranch began to prosper. Charlotte continued her foundation work, often traveling to town to meet with women seeking help. Jesse always accompanied her, still protective, though threats were few. Their story had spread, and most folks treated them with respect, even admiration. One evening in late October, Charlotte grabbed Jesse's hand during dinner, her face tight with pain. "It's time." The next hours were the longest of Jesse's life. The midwife from town arrived quickly, but Jesse paced the porch like a caged animal, flinching at every cry from inside. When silence fell, he feared the worst, until a different cry split the air, high and indignant and perfect. "Mr. Hartman," the midwife appeared at the door, smiling. "You have a son, and your wife is asking for you." Jesse entered the bedroom to find Charlotte propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair like Jesse's. "Say hello to your son," Charlotte whispered, transferring the precious weight to Jesse's arms. Jesse looked down at the miracle in his hands, this perfect blend of himself and Charlotte, and felt tears sliding down his cheeks. "Hello, little man. I'm your papa. I thought we could call him Marcus," Charlotte said softly. "After Mr. Wellington, without him, we might never have had this chance." "Marcus Hartman." Jesse tested the name. Strong name for what I'm sure will be a strong boy. Little Marcus chose that moment to open his eyes, green like his mother's, and stare solemnly at his father. Jesse felt his heart expand to make room for this new love, different but equal to what he felt for Charlotte. The first year passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, and endless wonder. Marcus grew strong and healthy, crawling everywhere, getting into everything. Jesse built a fence around Charlotte's garden just to keep their son from eating all the vegetables before they ripened. The ranch prospered. Jesse's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread, bringing buyers from San Francisco and beyond. Charlotte's foundation expanded too, opening a safe house in Sacramento where women could stay while starting new lives. One spring morning, Jesse was teaching Marcus to walk. The boy was determined but unsteady. When riders approached, Jesse tensed automatically, then relaxed as he recognized their nearest neighbors, the Johnsons, accompanied by a woman he didn't know. "Morning, Jesse," Tom Johnson called, Got someone here wants to meet Charlotte. Says she knew her from before." The woman dismounted, middle-aged, well-dressed, with kind eyes. Something about her seemed familiar, though Jessie couldn't place her. Charlotte emerged from the house, took one look at the woman, and gasped. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Theodore Blackwood's sister smiled sadly. "Hello, Charlotte. I hope you don't mind my coming. I've wanted to thank you personally for so long." Charlotte glanced at Jessie, who gave a small nod, then gestured to the porch. "Please come in. We have coffee on." Over the next hour, Margaret Blackwood told her story, how she'd used her inheritance to make restitution to her brother's victims, how Charlotte's courage had inspired her to stand up to her family, how she'd been traveling the West, seeking out those Theodore had wronged, trying to make amends. "I know nothing can undo what he did," Margaret said quietly. "But I wanted you to know that some good has come from all that evil. The money he stole is being returned. The families he destroyed are being helped. It's not enough, but it's something." "It's more than something," Charlotte said firmly. "It's justice, real justice, not just punishment but restoration." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You're very kind. Kinder than I deserve, being his blood." "You're not responsible for your brother's crimes," Jessie said. "Only for what you do with your own life. Seems to me you're doing right." Before Margaret left, she pressed an envelope into Charlotte's hands. "For your foundation. It's doing wonderful work. Theodore would have hated knowing his money was helping women escape men like him. I find that fitting." After she'd gone, Charlotte and Jessie sat on the porch, watching Marcus chase butterflies in the yard. The envelope contained a bank draft for $50,000, enough to expand the foundation significantly. "The past keeps echoing," Charlotte said thoughtfully. "But different now, healing instead of hurting." "That's because we changed the tune," Jessie replied, pulling her close. "From revenge to redemption, from fear to hope." Marcus toddled over, arms raised to be picked up. Jessie lifted his son, settling him between himself and Charlotte. The boy babbled happily, pointing at everything, secure in his parents' love. "You know what today is?" Charlotte asked suddenly. Jessie thought. "April 20th. Why?" 3 years ago today. You arrested me in that saloon. 3 years. Jessie, look how far we've come." He laughed, remembering that desperate woman who'd fought like a wildcat, the cynical bounty hunter who'd thought he'd seen everything. "If someone had told me then that I'd be sitting here now, married to my prisoner, raising a son, running a ranch, you'd have thought they were crazy. Completely insane." He kissed her temple. Thank God for insanity. As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Jessie reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the violence, the desperate flight, all of it had led to this moment of perfect peace. A year later, Charlotte stood in the Sacramento courthouse, addressing a gathering of lawmakers, foundation supporters, and women whose lives had been changed. Jessie watched from the gallery, Marcus on his lap, as his wife spoke passionately about the need for legal reforms to protect women's rights. 3 years ago, I was nobody, Charlotte said. A woman without a name, without rights, without hope. I survived only because one good man chose justice over money, love over law. But no woman should have to depend on such rare fortune. Every woman deserves the protection of just laws and the support of society when facing abuse or exploitation. The audience erupted in applause. Several legislators took notes, promising to introduce bills based on the Foundation's recommendations. It was a beginning. Jessie knew. But real change started with beginnings. That night, as they drove home under starlit skies, Marcus asleep in the wagon bed, Charlotte leaned against Jessie's shoulder. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The adventure, the danger. Every man needs purpose." Jessie said thoughtfully. "For years. Mine was hunting, bringing in bounties, surviving another day. But that was just existing, not living. Now my purpose is this: our family, our ranch, your foundation, building something instead of tearing down. That's adventure enough." Charlotte smiled. "I love you, Jesse Hartman." "And I love you, Charlotte Hartman. Always have. Since that first night by the fire when you looked at me like I might be more than just another bounty hunter. You just didn't know it yet." They rode in comfortable silence, the ranch appearing before them like a promise kept. The house windows glowed warmly, welcoming them home. In the barn, horses nickered greetings. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, no longer lonely but part of the fabric of their life. Jesse helped Charlotte down from the wagon, then carried sleeping Marcus inside. As he tucked his son into bed, he marveled again at the transformation of his life. From hunter to protector, from loner to family man, from surviving to thriving. Charlotte appeared beside him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking how that wanted poster was the best job I ever took." She laughed softly. "Even with all the trouble that came with it?" "Especially with all the trouble. It brought me you." He turned in her arms, looking down at the woman who'd changed everything. "And that's worth any price." They left Marcus sleeping peacefully and retired to their own room. Through the window, the Sacramento Valley spread out under moonlight, their own piece of forever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: cattle to tend, foundation business to manage, a son to raise. But tonight, they had each other and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. As Charlotte settled into his arms, Jesse thought about the man he'd been. Lonely, bitter, existing on the edges of society. That man had died somewhere between Arizona and California, replaced by someone who understood that true strength wasn't in the gun you carried, but in the love you protected. "Jesse," Charlotte murmured, half asleep. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when Marcus is old enough, we'll tell him our whole story. Not the pretty version, but the truth. So he understands that people can change, that love can triumph over fear, that justice is worth fighting for even when the law fails." Jesse kissed her forehead. "I promise. We'll tell him how a bounty hunter captured the wrong woman and found the right life, and how a desperate fugitive discovered that sometimes being caught is the only way to be truly free." Charlotte added. They slept then, wrapped in each other and in the peace they'd fought so hard to achieve. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, carrying the scent of growing things and new beginnings. The hunter had found his home at last, and it was everything he'd never dared to dream. In the morning, little Marcus would wake them with his laughter. There would be chores to do, plans to make, lives to touch through Charlotte's foundation. But for now, in the quiet darkness, Jesse Hartman held his wife and knew with bone-deep certainty that every hard mile, every dangerous moment, every impossible choice had been worth it to reach this place of grace. The bounty hunter's last hunt had led him not to death or gold, but to life abundant, and that, Jesse thought as sleep finally claimed him, was the greatest treasure of all. The end. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. If you enjoyed Jesse and Charlotte's journey from pursuit to paradise, please let us know where you're listening from in the comments below. We'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about this tale of redemption and romance in the American frontier. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage, love, and justice from the Old West. Happy trails, partners.